Well, I want to welcome you to the program. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have the privilege and pleasure and gift of welcoming Father John Riccardo, joining us all the way from Plymouth, Michigan. Father John, thank you for taking time to be with us today.
Tom, Kari, great to be with you. Happy Lent.
Thank you. And you know what? We know it's a happy Lent when we're feeling it, and it's maybe not always feeling too happy. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, I know, Father John, that many of our listeners don't know that your father recently passed away. We heard from your personal assistant, and were able to actually go and see the most recent homily that you gave at his funeral, which was really beautiful. If you want to do goals, that would be like the goal of my life, is to have a homily as beautiful as that about your father. And first, our condolences. I just know how painful it is to lose your father, and that we're praying for you. And our listeners, I know when they hear this, will be praying for you too. But we love just to hear a little bit about what the Lord is teaching you through this and showing you. I know that you will go initially to him for comfort and for insight and just to be moved in faith.
Well, thank you, first of all. And like I say to people all the time, the best thing I can do for anybody who's passed away is to pray for them. I want to presume my dad's either home or on his way home, and so I'm going to continue to pray for him until he tells me, I don't need your prayers anymore, son. But my dad was really the greatest man I've ever known. So he and my mom were married for 66 years. He was my mom's caregiver for the better part of the last 20. Raised me and my 4 brothers and sisters. And yeah, it's hard for me to sum up. I think I joked in the funeral, just I always kind of felt bad for anybody who was going to try to sum up my father's life if it wasn't me, because I just don't know a better man than him. He was not only a really successful businessman, but he was an extraordinary disciple of Jesus, the best husband that I think most women ever saw, and the best dad I could ever hope for. I remember writing him one time, actually right before I went to seminary when I moved overseas, and I put a letter in the mail to him and just said, I'm so grateful I have a chance to tell you this before you die, because I don't know how long you and I are going to have together, but I know the Father because of you. And I don't know of a better compliment that a son or a daughter can give to their dad than to say that, like you have revealed and relived on earth for me, as Pope John Paul II used to say the task of fatherhood was, who God the Father is. So I miss him greatly, but I talk to him constantly, and I believe in the communion of saints and the really thin veil that separates us from them. And I've already seen him working. I'm seeing some incredible things happening to my family.
That's really beautiful, Father John, especially that theme that your father was the place of manifestation of who God the Father is. I've been doing a lot of reflecting on that in this year of mercy. I feel like that's one of the things the Lord is really drawing my attention to, really bringing me into, is focusing less on being a laborer in the field and being more a child who can play before the Father. And I think a lot of that is connected to or traced back to our own relationships with our own fathers. Does our Father provide that sense of covering and that safe place where we can learn how to play, and we are celebrated by our Father? There are a lot of folks, a lot of men who are walking this earth with what you can call father wound. And so that can really hold them back from being able to experience a sense of freedom and confidence and delight in the Father. Is that something that you see as a pastor who are interacting with many, many fathers?
Absolutely. It's something that I see, and it's something that I went through, even though my father was as great a man as he is. But yeah, there's it's funny for myself in Lent. One of the things that I've been focusing on is just, and it resonates or overlaps with what you just said, which is, the first call in discipleship is a call just to be with Jesus. And we kind of fly through things like that to get to the cost of discipleship and the rewards of discipleship. But whether we're talking about our relationship with the Father or our relationship with the Son, God's longing for, you can use intimacy, friendship, whatever. Like, God just likes our company. which is really kind of astounding, right? I mean,
Yes.
like, who the heck am I? Like the creator of the universe enjoys my company. I don't understand that, but he does. And he made us for friendship, and the Father is longing for us to know him as our Father, and the security that comes from that. And the fact that I think so many, I can only speak for men because I don't understand women, but so many of us, we find our identity, from what we do, and we're trying to measure up and earn love. And the Father's just saying, son, everything I have is yours, and you don't need to win my love. You just need to respond to it. And I went through that myself, like I say, with an experience that I had with the Lord about a year and a half ago. Even though I had as good a father that I have, and I see it constantly in men, that they don't have a great relationship with their dad, so the relationship with God the Father is very distorted, and God wants to heal that, and that's one of the themes for this year of mercy, I think.
Father John, you've been drawn into a call to be a real distinct part of this extraordinary Jubilee Year of Mercy. Pope Francis naming you, calling you to be one of those missionaries of mercy. And that's something that, we hear about in the news, like the Catholic news. But concretely, how has that impacted your Jubilee year, that you're called to be, in a certain sense, a walking sign of the Father's mercy and of the grace of this Jubilee? What's it meant for your priesthood to be a missionary of mercy?
I don't think any of us know yet, because we don't know what the heck the title means. It's really kind of funny. We're like, so what do you do? We're like, I don't know. I got a letter to suspend my normal pastoral duties. I thought, you got to be kidding me. I think what it's meant is, it's certainly something that I'm conscious of. Particularly, I think, the obvious would be in the confessional, but maybe particularly when I'm visiting people who are away from the church, who are contemplating coming back. I'll give you an example. I went and visited a guy last week, brought him into the church. He's dying of Lou Gehrig's disease. He can't talk anymore. He communicates by staring at a screen, and it's got an infrared screen, and so he prints with his eyes. It's really fascinating. And so I went to him, and I knew he wanted to come into the church because we talked before his disease got really bad. And I mentioned to him one time, when I was talking with him last week, I just said, I knew he liked the Holy Father. I said, so, I'm here really on the Holy Father's behalf because I am one of his missionaries of mercy. And so, if you will, I'm standing here first and foremost in the place of Jesus, welcoming you home. But I'm also here extending you the hands of the Holy Father, trying to encourage you just not to be afraid, and to come back, and to let the Lord just wash over you with all his grace. And I mean, this guy who can't talk is just a bucket of tears, as he hears all this. And so I guess I'm conscious of it, especially in moments like that.
Father John, one of the things when Kari and I had a chance to dig into your podcasts, and Kari she loves using podcasts to kind of accompany her through her day. And so she's listened to a lot of couples and other Catholics that are out there. But then she said, Tom, have you ever heard of this Father John Riccardo? And I said, heard of him? I felt his elbows many times, right in my ribs. So even though he's a holy man outside of a basketball court, on the court, it's all justice of, the hammer of God, no mercy on the basketball court. So I'm just teasing.
I have to put up with this humor all the time, Father John, so.
Well, unfortunately, true.
Yeah. Well,
and I think he threw a few back at me, too.
Well, one of the things that kind of competitiveness kind of shows up, competitive for the Lord. I always did it in Jesus' holy name. So there was.
Oh, yeah.
But one of
the praise, we call that.
One of the things, by the way, I should ask you, did you ever play against the Legionaries of Christ?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. These guys would come in, they'd all be dressed in these same gray t-shirts and dark pants, and they would be so aggressive on the court. And they'd always, after they follow you, they'd say, sorry, brother.
We used to try to get him to get mad at us, and it never worked.
They always seem to show up with like a 6'6" ringer who just happened to be visiting that weekend who was playing for the Spanish national team. You're like, oh, come on. Yes.
So our greatest one, we had some local Italians come from the Italian college, and they had a guy who played in the NBA of the Italian league, 6'10", and the guy was just dominant. And I had to cover him. It was what a memory! I'm telling you, this is great. I'm glad I'm
back
getting
on
this
track,
out to you.
honey. Is this
Oh, no,
fun? This is some mercy.
This is why we wanted Father John on here to talk about the gift of mercy. No, but
The gift of
so
basketball.
Kari, tell the story. You discovered Father John's podcast, and what really jumped out was Jesus.
Oh, well, I think that when I listen to you, and I think you hear this all the time, is just a sense of not just that you teach truth, and it's you take what's profound and you make it accessible through the simple, but also just that sense that faith just comes through your words, where I feel like after I listen to what you share, it really builds my faith. It gives me this sense of confidence in Him, strength. I want to evangelize. I want to tell other people about God's love because it really radiates out. And it's not that other speakers aren't able to talk, but your conviction and your faith actually is felt, experienced through listeners. I just think it's fantastic that you're able to reach so many people now, probably something you've never expected, how God is using this, but just what our church desperately needs is the building up and the encouraging voice of Christ, and also truth that is uncovered and taught so people can be set free in how they see things.
Well, praise God. I mean, I just trust that that's a grace that He's allowed so that His name can be glorified. I've become so enamored with, there's a quote from the Aparecida document that Cardinal Bergoglio, before he was Pope Francis, wrote, where he says, knowing Jesus is the best gift that anyone can ever receive, that we have encountered Him is the best thing that's ever happened in our lives, and making Him known by our deeds and our words is our greatest joy. And I don't know a better summary of the gospel personally than that. And I resonate with it so much, or it resonates with me so much, because I just really do live for the Lord. I mean, I got a lot of problems and issues, and I'm far from a work in progress, or far from a finished product, but I love Jesus, and I love seeing people meet Him. It's the greatest thing, it's the greatest joy I have, is seeing somebody come to me or hearing something from somebody who says, I think I'm beginning to meet Him. It's just, it's what I live for.
You know, Father John, I think that just saying what you said is so refreshing for folks listening or watching this this broadcast, to hear a priest say, I love Jesus. I've met Him. He knows me. It's refreshing because it's not only it's true, but it's beautiful and it's good. It's what our life of faith is all about. Father John, you used the word encounter, and you quoted Pope Francis. I want to quote Pope Emeritus Benedict in his first encyclical, God is Love, and ask you to just reflect on this. In his first encyclical, he said that being Christian is not the result of an ethical choice or an ethical choice or an intellectual idea, but the encounter with an event, a person, Jesus Christ, that gives life a new horizon and a decisive direction. That it's really, first of all, about that event, that special breaking in, that I've met Jesus, He knows me, and how that makes all the difference.
I quote that probably almost every time I talk now, and I quote it increasingly so because the tragedy, people would ask the question, what's the crisis in the church? And there are a whole host of answers to that. But I think the crisis in the church is that most people will tell you, and these are most people in the pews, they'll tell you they have not had that encounter. They don't know Him. So the Sherry Waddell and all her work in forming intentional disciples and whatnot, there's a quote in there that's something to the effect of upwards of 40 to 50% of Catholics don't even think you can have a personal friendship with God, let alone the people who haven't had one. So I think that, the challenge of us right now in the church is
and it's our mission at Our Lady of Good Counsel here where I am, is to offer every person a life-changing encounter with Jesus. So we've, as it's been said in different places, we've sacramentalized people, but they haven't been evangelized, and that's what has to come first, and that's supposed to be the parents' role. But of course, the parents themselves will tell you they haven't met him, and so we're just in a mess. And so we're trying to come at this with a strategic effort to lead people into an encounter, so that their lives can be different, and then they can continue to grow as his disciples and tell others of the difference that he has made. And it's kind of like living in first century Palestine. We're surrounded by people who don't know him, but I know what you want, right? I mean, that's the advantage of being a disciple of Jesus. Like, even if you don't believe in the Lord, I know what you want. You know what everybody wants, because we know you were made with a whole for God. You were made for friendship with God. You were made for profound intimacy with God, with others too, but with God first. And that's the advantage that we have in sharing the gospel. We just have to find creative ways and new methods, like John Paul called us to do, to offer that to people. These are extraordinary days to live in because so many people haven't had the encounter. So they look at Christianity and they think, nothing to see here, it's boring, just move on. But it has everything to offer because it's not a religion, it's not a system, it's not an intellectual pursuit, it's not an ethical way of life. It's a friendship, and friendship means everything to people. Life without friends is horrible. So imagine what a friendship with God could be like.
Father John, when I think about that and the way it applies in marriage and family, so if we start with that reality that if I meet Christ, he's going to show me the Father. And in showing me the Father, he's going to show me how to father. And I think about so many married couples who are trying to just make it through today. So Kari and I have been blessed with 9 kids and 7 girls. So trust me, I don't understand women any better than you, Father John. And I've been laboring in the vineyard for many, many years, decades. So, but I think about what it takes for Kari and me to give to our kids the most precious treasure of all, which is that relationship with the Lord. And we know that we can't cause that to happen. So the greatest thing that we can give, that we want for them, we can't cause, but we can try to set them up for it. And so when I think about how important it is for men, foundational, critical, whatever dramatic word you want to use, for men to plunge themselves into that ocean of mercy, into that relationship with the Father because of Jesus, that the overflow that's going to have in their relationship with their wife, and then together with their wife in relationship with their kids. What happens when that rock of our marriage, that relationship with Christ, is missing? I know, Kari, you said one of the things that was so striking to you was in one of Father John's podcasts about the challenges that married couples face.
Well, I think that, Father John, what I love is listening to some of your talks on marriage, because it's really hard to find good teaching, and we desperately need it. Tom and I always are feeling not just attacking each other, but under attack. And it's just neat to find the teachings that you share. And then I also know that you have a heart for married couples because you see the struggle and you see the difficulty and what it takes to stay married. And I think you're even quoting that you every day have someone come into your office that is saying they are thinking of divorce. And just hearing we'll share with our listeners what you're able or what you've been doing in your parish to help build up marriages.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, not enough. That's the answer. We're profoundly aware of the challenges that couples are facing. Everything from entering into marriage with having no encounter with Jesus. So you're already not able to understand the sacramentality of it. To perhaps more often than not now a broken family that you came from, which doesn't mean you can't overcome it. It just means I've got an impairment there, if you will. To all the assaults that come at us from the culture,
So what we're trying to do now is we're trying to make the first step of our marriage prep program an intentional opportunity for them to encounter Jesus. So we actually use the Alpha course, which people are familiar with in different places, but it's a like an 11-week course, which is a great tool for evangelization, and we use that as the first step for marriage prep to lead young men and women of whatever age into that place where they've met Jesus and can begin to understand what it is that he's offering, confident that the more I know the Lord, the better able I'm going to be able to show, reveal, communicate him to my spouse, which is a significant part of what it means to say that marriage is a sacrament, right? So if a sacrament is a visible sign of an invisible reality that gives grace, the visible sign is the love that a husband and a wife have for each other. The invisible reality is the love that Jesus has for the church. So if I don't know the invisible reality, how am I going to understand the point? So we're trying to, we do that. We have a pretty robust marriage prep program. We use mentor couples to great effect. We try to do a pretty deep dive into natural family planning, just because we're convinced of, if you can learn true conjugal intimacy as opposed to contraceptive non-intimacy, it's going to bear great fruit in so many different ways. And then we try to do an ongoing enrichment for married couples. We've got programs that are offered for couples that are struggling, that are healthy, that want to continue to go deeper. So things like Living in Love, which is a retreat that we do 3-4 times a year. We do a thing called 8 Great Dates, where we're having couples sit at tables where it's just the two of them, a glass of wine, and there's some talks, but all the conversation just happens between the two of them. And then we just try to offer as much counseling as we can and not let finances get in the way, because a healthy person needs somebody to go talk to and say, hey, I can't be objective about my own life. Can you hear what's going on and give me some input? So we need to do more, but I think we're starting to do some things, and then we're really trying to take a significant stab at creating a new way of helping parents be the primary educators of their children in the ways of faith. So I think most parents have at least heard that they're supposed to be the primary educators of their children, but they have no idea what that means, and they're not equipped to do it. And so, maybe this is too revealing, but I think the church should actually repent for enabling parents for being bad parents, because it's almost like the church has said, well, I don't think most people are doing this, so we'll just take it, give us your kids for an hour a week, and we'll teach them the faith. Good luck. So we're trying to create some things that we think have some real potential to walk with parents, to put them back in their first spot, but not leave them on an island, give them good resources, really help them to be models and co-disciples with their kids as they try to encounter Jesus more deeply.
Father John, that's so very encouraging, and in a lot of ways it confirms one of the reasons why Kari and I are here. It was about a year and a half ago. Pope Francis, with his focus on the Year of the Family and the Synod on the family, he really emphasized this theme that families, as families, have a missionary dimension to them. Families must be families on mission. And for me, that was a beautiful way of linking communion and mission, that the deeper that Kari and I and our family strive to be this communion of persons, this domestic church, there should be a missionary dynamic or dynamism outwards, just as family, that ought to show up. And Kari loves when I talk all that theological language, but for me, it's a very meaningful thing, because what it translated to us was, well, let's do this Curran Crew initiative. Let's take our family life, our marriage and our family, the things that we're doing in our home, and let's make them accessible. Let's make them available. And the theme that really sort of jumped out at us was the concept of radiant relationships, that truth, when it takes root in hearts and it takes root in lives, it's going to radiate. Just like we're, Kari was so struck that what radiates from you when you speak is Jesus, and that's a sign of your communion with him. And the more profoundly we sink into him, the more he's going to radiate from us. But as Kari and I have walked this path, one of the things that, two of the things, and I'd love to have you address both of them, two of the things that really have emerged to us, one is spiritual attack, and the second is the fundamental need for community, families walking together. That the more that we've said we are going to become visible as a family, striving to not only live our faith and share our faith, but help other families do the same, the more that we've seen the fundamental need of other families to walk with us, and how intense the attack of the devil and the realm of the demonic is against families that are trying to live intentionally for the Lord. I'll just throw that to you now and say, jump in wherever you like.
Yeah, well, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the simple truth is you just can't live a Christian life alone. I mean, it's not possible. So we need, just like I need other disciples around me to inspire me to live, all in for Jesus. Maybe even more so, families and married couples, because of the all-out, destruction or, loss of understanding of what it means to be married and family, need strong couples and families around them to walk with. So, and I think, to the degree that, and you guys see this, I know it, to the degree that you model something different, it can't not be attractive. And I'm looking at my window right now in my office, and I'm looking at a good friend of mine's house. They've got 7 kids, and they're very involved here, but they're kind of like what I would call they're a home where there's the normalcy of faith. So they're attractive, they're joyful. Jesus is first and foremost, but they got issues, and he's a successful businessman and whatnot. And one day, the woman who lives next door walked up to the fence line and looked at him as he was mowing the lawn, and just asked him to turn off his lawnmower real quick, and he did. And she says, "How are you doing this?" And that's all it took. But I mean, she'd been watching him for years, and she knew there was something strikingly different about their life, simply from, she never even heard their conversations about Jesus. She just knew, I'm not hearing people scream at each other. I see honor. I see a father who looks like he loves to play with his kids. And I don't see that in my house or in the neighborhood. And so it just provoked her to ask the question. And I'm sure you guys get that often. So I think we want to trust, Jesus says what? Nobody lights a lamp and puts it underneath a basket. Why? Because that would be stupid. That's why. It just makes no sense, right? So his point is, I have not lit you on fire so that you would hide it. Because the house, that the lamp is supposed to shine in, the house is the world. And we're that lamp. And it's like a hand lamp. That's the image that Jesus uses. And it's in his hand. And he wants to walk from room to room throughout this house with us in his hand, bringing light and illumination. And the first step in, kind of leading others to the Lord is just live attractively. And when couples do that, and when families do that, it's going to provoke people to ask questions. And what a gift that is, because then you can kick the door off the hinge. And, of course, that's going to get the evil one's attention as well. So, the devil hates marriages, right? Split marriages, you split the capacity, or you impair the capacity for children to understand the Father's love and love in general. And so, the evil one's doing everything he can to bring division and play on things. The only thing I'd add real quick, it's something that I've been really struck by over the last couple of years. When a priest or a deacon extends his hand over a married couple in the nuptial blessing, it's probably the most analogous act to the act of consecration that a priest does. So, a priest extends his hands over bread and wine, and they change by the power of the Holy Spirit. They're different, like they're filled with divine life. when a priest or a deacon gives the nuptial blessing, it's really not a blessing, it's really a consecration, which means all of a sudden the couple now has access to power that they didn't have before. So grace is one of these words we throw around all the time, and we hear it, but I don't know that I understand it, let alone anybody else does. So I remember one time just asking, Lord, I don't understand what grace really means. And this was about the time of the baseball steroid scandal. And I felt like the Lord just said, John, they're spiritual steroids. So steroids are illegal in athletics because they give you an unfair advantage in competition. But God wants you to win. Like, he wants every couple to be great. He wants you to thrive. And the good news of the gospel in general, and maybe of marriage in particular, the sacrament of marriage, is this is not a matter of exhortation. It's not a matter of somebody saying, come on, Tom, Kari, you guys can do this. You can dig deep. You can be great. If that's the case, we're doomed. When Jesus lays out the vision of marriage, that there's no divorce, the response of the apostles is, if that's the case, it's better not to marry. I mean, that's the human response. And the Lord says, for man, this is impossible, but not for God. And God gives power to a married couple to live greatly. And so when you're struggling, when I don't want to forgive, when I don't want to take the first step, when you've done something that I hate, but you did it anyway, and I don't want to be gracious or kind, I can look at the Lord and go, Lord, I can't do this, but I'm not on my own. You're in me. You gave me power. I need that power right now. Help me to forgive.
Well, and I think, Father John, where you ended is where it often becomes so difficult, and that is God's power often comes to us through the door of our own powerlessness. And boy, that's a place where we rarely want to visit, and we certainly don't want to live. And yet, as creatures of God, that's our fundamental stance. And so just being open to say, God, I'm going to rely on you for everything at every moment. Because I'm powerless, and I'm going to rejoice in that, St. Paul. But boy, it's only when we strive to, as Kari and I have found, okay, now that we're doing this ministry work together, it has been a great gift. But one of the great gifts is it unveils iron sharpens iron, right? Yeah. That it was only because we're striving to live for the Lord and be on mission for the Lord as he's calling us that he begins to unveil those rough edges that he wants to smooth out, the cleanse that vessel so that we can become a greater recipient of his divine life so that it can be poured out through us. In fact, Father John, that kind of leads me to one of the principal images of the extraordinary year of mercy, Jubilee Year of Mercy, is the open door, and how we're called not only to enter the door and to experience his mercy, to be filled with his mercy, but then to go out into the world on mission, to be those. You're formally a missionary of mercy, but in a certain way, I think we all have that call, having experienced his mercy, to go forward and be a missionary of mercy.
Well, yeah, there's no question we all are. I mean, that's what it means to be a disciple, is to go tell others about the one who has forgiven me, restored me, healed me, given me hope, picked me up from the pit, whatever, and I one of the things I'm aware of, maybe since my dad died, because we had a mission in the parish right after my dad died, and I led it, and it was the day after my father was buried. So I was in no place to really do this. I just didn't want to do it, and I can battle depression. So I shared that the first night. I just said, this is the last place I want to be. I want to be holed up in a ball and in my chapel in the dark. And the response from people to that was so surprising to me. I tend to be rather revealing as it is, I think. But my point is, the more real we are to each other and the more vulnerable we are to each other, the more we're able to really be missionaries of mercy, because the people that we're encountering are people like us, and they need to know that there's hope for them. And
A guy wrote me shortly after I was ordained a priest, almost 20 years ago. He sent me a letter that at the time just annoyed me to no end, but it's probably the only letter I ever remember receiving. And in the letter, he said something at the end that said something like, "You make faith sound like a Nike commercial." And I mean, I was just like, ugh, ugh. And he said afterwards, he says, "What about those of us who've blown it?" And I'll never forget that. And, you know, the beauty of priesthood or doing pastoral counseling or working in marriage ministry is you just really become aware of the fact that everybody's wearing a facade or a mask, and they're longing to drop the mask, but behind whatever appearance they're putting up, most people are battling some really serious things, and it's amazing to me that anybody's even sane, given some of the things that I hear in people's lives. And so, again, the point is just, we go out into a world that's broken, and we go out as kind of like that portable field hospital that Pope Francis talks about all the time. And only to the degree that I know I'm broken, I'm wounded, I'm dependent, I'm a creature, I need help, I have a savior, only the degree that I've experienced that, am I going to be able to really help somebody else.
Well, and I think that we can relate, and our just own journey of parenting a lot of kids and trying to be on mission. We share often just our failures and our struggles, and I feel like the Lord is almost causing us to have be humbled, because once we try to say, "Oh, we figured this out," or "We got this message all worked out," bam, we just experience or encounter this humility, and often Tom and I are just laughing. But it's a beautiful thing. I think a lot of people do feel like they're alone, and they don't want to admit, "Gosh, I don't know how to raise my kids in faith. I really don't even know where to begin." It's such a daunting task that they'd rather just turn on the TV and watch the next show and kind of just push it to the side. But just when you share that and stand in solidarity with others, it's such an increase of strength. It's almost like when you expose those hidden areas of difficulties, you find strength.
Yeah, I mean, Kari, I think of confession. That the essence of confession is coming out of hiding. It's self-accusation, right?
Right.
Not self-defense. And so somehow there's a freedom, there's peace found in accusing ourselves rather than defending ourselves. And well, I'll tell you, when it comes to that whole idea of how do you restore a relationship in family life or in marriage, and it's leading with self-accusation, right? And so, you know, that I wrote a whole book on it, Kari, just for us, confession.
And if you need help with any of your sins, honey, I'm here to.
Yeah, thank you. So I practice self-accusation all the time. But well, Father John, when I talk to men, I say, look, where's that part in your life that you want to keep hidden from your wife? That's your weak point. That's your danger zone. Honesty is about being transparent. It's about coming out into the open in a way that's authentic and real. And that's going to be your your greatest safety is honesty, because you're going to be able to come out in the open with a contrite spirit before God, before our merciful Father, but then also to be able to learn how to reconcile in your own married life. There's where grace flows.
Yes.
Yeah, amen. You're the expert on that because you live it, and you said it perfectly.
John, when we think about in this Jubilee year and you're being a missionary of mercy and seeing it unfold, mercy is this, tremendous gift of God showing us favor when we don't deserve it, and wanting to restore us and heal us, and wanting to, set us free in ways to have that intimate friendship with the Father because of Jesus. Have you found any particular devotions like the Divine Mercy Chaplet or Message, or turning to Our Lady, Mother of Mercy, or, Pope Francis recommended a number of sort of guiding points focusing on the works of mercy, in his document announcing the Jubilee year. Have you found them to be particularly helpful as you've been pastoring your own parish in the Jubilee year?
Yeah, I found a couple of things helpful. The first is I'm very taken by Francis, I think, has said that he uses Matthew 25 as his nightly examination of conscience, which, of course, is the separation of the sheep and the goats. And in that, those who go on the left, the goats, it's all sins of omission. They didn't do this, they didn't feed, they didn't clothe, they didn't visit, they didn't care for, they didn't welcome. So I've tried to use that as a reflection point for myself personally, and we've talked about it a fair amount in the parish and in the parish school as well. I've also found just praying with the prodigal son, and especially again Rembrandt's image of the prodigal son, to be very helpful. And Henri Nouwen wrote that great book, The Return of the Prodigal Son, which I think when I first was handed it, I thought, oh, this is probably going to be really sappy. I don't think I want to read it. And I continue to find it to be actually a very provocative book, and one in which helps me get in the place of the father, the rebellious son, and the older rebellious son. So I find that to be a helpful thing. And I'm very taken with the image of Mary, undoer of knots. In fact, I have that image. I'm looking at it right now. But there's just something about the gentle demeanor of Mary in that image, where she's just not nervous, So my life's a big ball of twine that's all knotted up, and she just has it in her hand, and she's very slowly and confidently and methodically undoing the knots and helping things get straightened out. And those have been things that have been helpful for me, I know, personally.
Kari has done a really neat job in our own home of taking the works of mercy and translating them. We have family meetings in our home pretty much on a weekly basis, where we get our kids together, and it's not only just for organizing, but also for a type of catechizing. And as Kari and I have reflected on these spiritual works of mercy of feeding the hungry or visiting the imprisoned as a corporal work of mercy, to be able to find connections in family life itself. So often they're only thought of as applying outside the family, but to think about the way our kids hunger for affirmation, to be named and known and celebrated as a gift from God, the gift that they are to us and they are to be in the world. And so one of the things that we've been doing quite a bit of is reflecting on these works of mercy and how they apply actually in the family life.
Well, Tom makes it sound a lot better than it actually plays out. But I think what is neat is just when we talk about visit the imprisoned, we really look at supporting those families that are new in marriage, have young ones. And it's like these moms are stuck home and they're unable to get out of the house. I lived that for many years. And so we deploy our kids to babysit for free and to allow that mom time out or a date night with her husband, and teach them, this is a way you can be imprisoned, and just try to think of other ways that might play out in life that they see around them, because most kids aren't going to be going to a prison. It's just been a real gift to us to be able to dig deeper and just search, okay, what is God really saying here in these corporal works of mercy? Because I think a lot of times we just go on with our day and forget that there's the hungry and the needy and the naked, and unless you really intentionally take time to focus on that as a family, it just kind of gets, those sins of omission. They just get left on the side, and we get very caught up in sports and going to practices and getting homework done and doing the family party or some event. And so it's just been a real gift to us to focus on this. I don't know if you see that in your parish. You said you're doing some kind of teaching with the kids there at the school. How does that show up for you all?
Yeah, that's a beautiful adaptation. I like that very much. I'm going to steal it.
You're welcome. I've stolen a few things of yours, so.
I don't have anything original, trust. I think one of the things that, it probably starts with something as simple as this. When a husband and a wife marry, they promise that they will love and honor each other all the days of their life. I ask couples all the time, so what does that mean? Like, have you said to each other what that means for me to tell you I'm going to honor you? And unfortunately, we live in a culture where we don't often see people get honored. We tend to see a lot of very negative humor, roasting of people, good-natured ribbing. But one of the places to start, I'm thinking of like the hungry or the thirsty, and hungry and the thirsty for honor. And a great thing to do, even in these final couple weeks of Lent, is just to have an intention every day to not let the day end without going out of your way to say something to build up your husband, your wife, your kids, especially for parents with kids who are, younger, teenage and under, because the task of a parent is to civilize a barbarian. So that means you got to. There's a lot of discipline in place, But,
Yes, there is.
but it can't be all that, right? And
Yes.
so I have to both discipline, correct you, but I also really need you to hear me say, not, hey, you had a great game, but I need to hear you say, son, you have this in you, and I saw the way you reached out to your sister today, and I just want you to know I noticed it. It was beautiful. And I mean, that's what builds a child up, It's like, wow, my dad saw goodness in me. Because the tragedy is so many people don't think that they're good. We're afraid that if you really knew what was going on in my head, you would run from me. So for parents to do that and for spouses to do that, that's a really practical way. The hungry and the thirsty start with the hungry and the thirsty for honor and love and respect and affirmation and whatnot. So,
Father John, and I'll just make this sort of final comment. I want to respect the time that you have today. We've found it's a very fascinating thing because we encounter what you just said all the time. And yet we will occasionally also encounter kids when we're like bringing this message out to families or to young people, that kids will be saying, oh, no, my parent tells me I'm unique and special all the time. But, they do it in sort of a worldly context. Like, you can be anything you want to be, and you're just such a gift. And it's this sort of total coddling and a total, like, overwhelming sense of you're my everything in a way that can be very unhealthy. And so one of the things, it's like we feel like, okay, how do we recover the authentic truth that they are this gift from God without it tumbling into that you can be anything you want to be? And so, like, we've taken to tell our kids, no, you can't be anything you want to be, but you have the opportunity to be the one God created you to be. And let's take a look at your gifts and what God's given to you and say, why did God give you those gifts? I wonder what he wants to do through you in this world. I wonder what he wants you to become in this world that only you can become. And he's deployed you here. He sent you here.
And then the kids say, Dad, you're just talking God language to me. I know you're just... No, but it is true. It is true that depending on what home you grow up in, it can be one extreme or the other. But definitely, just even I still to this day crave affirmation from my mom. Just one word on the phone, and I'm sure when your father, your mother speak to you in a way that was positive, or even your father from heaven, that is just such a comfort and a deep solace. It goes way into the depth of my soul, unlike any other person can touch me there besides Jesus. So,
my dad, the single most important conversation I ever had with going into priesthood, and it happened years before I went even to seminary, but it was a conversation I had with my dad in his kitchen. And I basically said something to the effect of, hey, thanks a lot for paying for my education. I really don't know what I want to do with my life. Is it okay if I go do this? And my dad looked at me and said, son, you can do whatever you want, and I will bless it. And I can't tell you how much that set me free. Yeah. So it's like the dying memory I have of my dad. I mean, that single word from him had the capacity to get inside of me in a way that nobody else could, which told me my dad will be proud of me no matter what I do, in terms of, whether I make 12 grand a year or 600,000 a year. My dad loves me, and it's not dependent on my title. So you can do all those things at home.
That's very beautiful, Father John. Thank you so much. And I want to just thank you for taking as much time as you have with us today on our program. It's just been a real blessing and a gift to be able to interact with you again. Kari, from listening to you, to be able to talk with you, and me, to be able to look forward to that next basketball game we can have.
Hey, I just want to know if you guys have like any great family retreats this summer at your parish, because Tom and I just want to fly our whole family out to just hang out. I'm sure you must get this all the time.
Great to have you out.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.